So good afternoon, members of the Management Committee. Meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please complete the request to speak form. MAG staff can assist with any questions that you may have. If you parked in the garage, a parking validation stamp is available on the information table in the hallway. If you've purchased a transit to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are also available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Management Committee, I will go down the order alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Patrick Banger. Chair Barton.
Here.
Thank you. Ben Bitter.
Here.
Thank you. Jean Blackman. Chris Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Andrew Ching.
Here.
Thank you. Ron Corbin.
Here.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Henry Darwin.
Here.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes. Bruce Gardner. Rachel Goodwin.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Swan as proxy for Andy Granger.
Here.
Thank you. Rosa Inchowski.
Present.
Thank you. Suzanne Jones. Jeff Kulaga. Leo Liu. Reyes Medrano. Alexis Tamarin-Kinsey as proxy for Jessica Mefford Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack as proxy for Brian Myers.
Present.
Thank you. Grady Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Calvin Pilcher. Christopher Reams as proxy for Jen Pekorski.
Here.
Thank you. Bryant Powell.
Here.
Thank you. Justin Fair as proxy for Winnette Reed.
Here.
Thank you. Bill Murphy as proxy for Jim Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Jennifer Toth.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Valenzuela.
Here.
Thank you. Bruce Walls. Matthew Williams. Bob Wingenroth.
Here.
Thank you. Ryan Peters is proxy for Joshua Wright.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we begin, I would first like to recognize and thank Mr. Stephen Erno for his service to the region and to Town Manager of Wickenburg. We wish Stephen all the best in his well-deserved retirement. To represent Wickenburg, I would like to welcome Interim Town Manager Andy Granger, who is not here today. I believe we got a proxy, Tim Swan. But I would also like to just recognize and welcome Andy to this group. And thank you, Andy, for serving on the Management Committee. We now proceed to item number 3, which is a call for audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. Please note that we have a new podium location to my left, adjacent to the audience seating, from which members of the public are invited to provide their comments. And we have received no comments to speak as of today. Is that correct, staff?
That is correct. We have no in-person comments and we have received no written comments prior to today's meeting for this agenda item or any item on today's agenda.
Thank you. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with the committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. And I believe you've already noted that we do not have any written comments as well, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct.
All right, so we'll now move on to item number 4. Items 4A through 4C are for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Hearing none, our next agenda item is item number 5, approval of the consent agenda. Items 5A through 5E are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? You guys are easy today. I like this. Okay, hearing none. So where I'm at now. Lost my train of thought. You got me excited. So we've received no requests to speak for any item on the consent agenda as well. And staff, we have not received any written comments as we've already noted.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So is there a motion to approve the consent items 5A through 5E? And that is a motion from Mr. Kulaga. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bill Murphy. Staff, you have that?
Thank you.
Okay, we will have those participating in the meeting online take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who did not turn on their cameras. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. All right. Members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their cameras?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Kathy Valenzuela?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We now move on to item number 6, Pathways Home Highlights and Updates. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Amy St. Peter, Deputy Executive Director, will introduce the item. Amy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for this opportunity to present to you an update on our activities in homelessness and housing. I'm joined today by Brian Gruters. He is our MAG Regional Homeless Program Manager. The purpose of today's presentation then is to offer an update on progress made on Pathways Home, the Regional Homelessness Action Plan for local and tribal governments, and also to share with you information about a new program that's designed to offer you technical assistance in order to build and preserve housing that's affordable for your residents. Next slide, please. Before we proceed with these updates, we want to give you just an idea of how this work in homelessness and housing fits within our total portfolio of regional human services planning here at MAG. There are 4 main categories that we undertake at MAG when we're working in regional human services planning. That includes homelessness, domestic violence, human services transportation for older adults and people with disabilities, and then community initiatives. We have a variety of activities underway in each of these areas. Some of these activities are driven by you, such as with Pathways Home. Some of these activities are shaped more so by our compliance with federal government, with their initiatives and their regulations, such as a continuum of care. A number of these activities have been underway at MAG for decades. The Social Services Block Grant, for example, was one of our very first activities that we undertook when we formed the MAG Human Services Division back in 1976. So that's been underway for a long time. 2 of our committees, the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council and our Continuum of Care, are actually celebrating their 25-year anniversary this year. So that's a significant milestone and an idea of how long we've been working in some of these areas. Our work over the years has evolved. So for example, today, we're talking not just about homelessness, but also about housing. That's a relatively new focus for us, considering that we've been working in homelessness for 25 years, and now we're working in housing as well. Some of our work has really helped to tee up future work, such as our extensive work in human services transportation for older adults, helped create a great foundation from which we could form Age-Friendly Arizona. We have an opportunity now, though, to refine and to reframe the way that we approach human services planning here at MAG. And we want to do so in close collaboration with you. It's critical that our work responds to your priorities. And so we'll be reaching out to your human services directors or other points of contact within your communities to better understand what your current priorities are and what kind of role you see for MAG in regional human services planning. We'll have multiple opportunities for input throughout this process, so please do feel free to reach out to us. We'll be reaching out to you as well and circling back with you at key intervals. We welcome your input as we really seek to enhance the alignment between your priorities and our activities, to articulate a renewed mission statement for the division, and then to ensure that we have an appropriate committee and staffing structure in which to undertake regional human services planning at MAG and to align with your priorities. At this point now, I'd like to invite Brian to the podium to offer that update on Pathways Home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Please. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief update. Pathways Home, as you remember, is our work locally to address this issue that is region-wide. There are many challenges. So just to list a few, point in time count, we counted 9,435 folks sheltered and unsheltered this past year. That number is a 27% increase since 2020. So that's outpacing many of our similarly sized cities around the country. And in addition to that, if that wasn't bad enough, for every 10 people that we do good work with and help get into housing, and there is lots of good work going on, we know that 19 more people are becoming homeless, which is just a reflection of the issue that Amy mentioned. Housing is a problem in Arizona. So this is what we are hoping to address with Pathways. The objective through Pathways, we have 3 action items. One is to work regionally, not in silos. We've seen that as a driving factor behind change-making communities in other parts of the country. Bringing in diverse partnerships, that bottom row there, and understanding that outside of the homeless community, it's helpful to bring in other folks from other sectors to do work on this issue. And then lastly, increasing housing, very critical to this issue. So going to focus on that one right now. 2 updates I'd like to provide. This will be a short presentation, but primarily wanted to highlight the work that we're doing to bring back more information to you all. The regional scenario analysis is something that we do quarterly to provide an update on kind of gaps, what we're doing as a community to address those gaps. So you may remember from meetings previously that we would come in and say, like, here's the number of units and apartments that we have available for people experiencing homelessness here, the number of shelter beds, and so forth. And here's the gap to get us down to 25% reduction in homeless services as outlined in the Pathways plan. We're working on up. So we went out and sought technical assistance from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD was very helpful in providing some technical assistance on this. We're trying to do more insightful, more in-depth modeling rather, to bring back information to you all on how this plan is moving forward. So, for example, we know that there are X number of beds in the community and we need Y number of beds in the community. But what we haven't known up until now is what happens when a person goes into shelter and then they go into permanent housing and then they leave permanent housing and go into a home with their parents. What does that pathway do to our system? And there are other pathways. So looking at all those things is the intention of this new modeling system that we're bringing online. So hoping in the next quarter to have another report on it. In addition, wanted to speak a little bit about funding sources. So funding is a big part of what we're trying to do through Pathways. Obviously, finding more funding it's hard, right? It's the name of the game is we don't have enough resources to address this issue, just like every community. But I'm happy to say that we are seeing some potential pathways for progress. So mentioned one a few months ago, the Youth Homelessness Systems Improvement Grant, $1.7 million. That's already, that money's coming in. So we won that grant a while back, thanks to one of our staff here. We're going to use that as a platform to apply for more money for programmatic costs to actually fund programming. And then in addition to that, we're working on our annual grant funding for $46 million. The goal is to keep all of that money. Some of that's discretionary for HUD. And so every year we're trying to keep at that number. So we're in progress of that right now. And then in addition to that, there's a third funding option that we're working on. There's a PSH, so Permanent Supportive Housing Notice of Funding Opportunity available from HUD. I believe all of you would have gotten communication from our team about that. We're going to do an info session on the 13th of August. This is $10 million that's available locally to develop, like for hard costs to develop housing. So very competitive. 25 communities are going to get that out of about 400 who would be applying. But, you know, we have some things going for us. We have this additional money that Matt brought in and things like that that we're hoping to really use to leverage a good application. So fingers crossed, we'll report back on it when we know more. Lastly, this home TA stuff. excellent program that we got coming online. Amy's going to speak more about that in 2 seconds. I wanted to mention one other thing, which is just that we are sending your staff letters of commitment, which we do every year. Those letters of commitment are designed to tell us approximately what your communities are spending to address homelessness, both directly and then indirectly through things like transportation that impacts the issue, but is not necessarily like housing. So we use that for planning purposes. I think those are due August 15th, and I know your staff are already on it because my team have let me know that everybody's doing the good work. Last thing is to forecast that this plan it's 3 years old now. And so, our goal was to, by 2027, reduce homelessness by 25%. It's been going up a lot. So we are seeing a need to probably strategize around how we're going to hit that goal or what that goal is going to be going forward. More to come on that, but we may be talking about a Pathways 2.0 sometime in the future and hope to bring you feedback on that soon. Back to you, Amy.
It's not often that I'm shorter than people. This is new. Kind of enjoying this. Next slide, please. Okay. So those letters of commitment, thank you so much for turning those around. That really does help us as part of our working together regionally aspect of Pathways Home, and to know what you're contributing helps us to be able to convey the significant commitment that you are making. So thank you for all of that. Next slide, please. So this is a new program that we had referenced. It's Housing Opportunities and Mentorship and Education, or HOME. We were very excited to be able to receive this. In December of 2023, we received a $500,000 grant from JP Morgan Chase Foundation with the goal of giving you free and customized technical assistance to build and preserve housing that will be affordable for your residents. We developed this program because of the housing crisis that our communities are facing right now, and because we heard from our member agencies, that this is an issue and that you'd like more information, that you'd like some support and some capacity building in this space. And so we're able to secure that grant funding, and we're able to deliver this program as a result. We've been working very closely with our Human Services Technical Committee and Community Initiatives Committees. So your staff, your council members have been really helping us, working hand in glove to shape this program. And so they helped us to develop it, and now they're helping us to implement it as they oversee these next activities here. And we're also very indebted to the community partners that you see listed on the screen. They've shared significant time and expertise with us, and we're thankful for their participation. If we can go to the next slide, please. We've accomplished a lot since receiving the grant in December then, working very closely with both TC and Community Initiatives Committee. We're able to develop an inventory, and that inventory reflects the topics that you're interested in when it comes to housing that's affordable. How to build it, how to preserve it, how to make it more sustainable. And so then we took this inventory and we used that to competitively secure a consultant who will actually deliver that technical assistance to local and tribal governments. The Matrix Design Group won that proposal, and they have assembled a really talented team of people who have expertise in the areas of technical assistance, and they'll be able to deliver that to you over the next year or so. Next slide, please. These are just some of the examples of the technical assistance that we're able to provide. Again, this came very directly from feedback from our member agencies, and now we have some great qualified help to deliver this to you in the upcoming months. Next slide, please. We'll be featuring these technical assistance topics at an event next Tuesday. We're hoping that you, your teams, your colleagues, your coworkers can come join us. This is Tuesday, August 13th. It will be a virtual event from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We understand that 5 hours can be a lot for someone to contribute out of their day. So if you're able to come for the entire event, that's great. If you're able to come for part of the event, that's also great. We'll be sure to follow up with you so that everyone has all of the information that's generated by this event. We'll be sharing more information about those technical assistance areas and how to request it. Our speakers will include the Arizona Community Foundation, LISC, League of Arizona Cities and Towns, and the Bylaws Health Foundation, in addition to the Matrix Design Group. You should have information about that at your places. The agenda and the flyer were in your agenda packet. It's available online, and you can register with this QR code as well. Next slide, please. Also on August 13th, you'll be able to request that technical assistance. Those forms will be available for about a month until September 13th. At that time, we'll have a team review those requests and then be able to prioritize them within the budgeted amount of $360,000. We do have a grant that's under active review right now with another local foundation, which would contribute more funding to this line item. So we have at least $360,000. We're hopeful to have more. We'll be able to confirm that with you by next month. So once we confirm those requests, we'll match up the local and tribal governments with the appropriate consultants and or community partners, and then they'll be able to receive that technical assistance throughout the year and through October 2025. And then at the end of 2025, we'll be able to pull together a final report that reflects all the lessons learned, the tools developed, and then we'll be able to share all of that with additional communities, both throughout the region, throughout the state, and hopefully beyond, because all communities are really struggling with this right now. So we want to make sure that that capacity and that information is available across the board. We can go to the next slide, please. So thank you very much for your feedback, for your support. We do encourage you to reach out to us at any time that you have feedback about homelessness and housing, as well as a general human services assessment that will be underway shortly. Your input is really critical to us as we align our efforts to your priorities. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy now to answer any questions that you might have for us. Thank you.
Amy, could you just real quickly go through some of the kinds of technical assistance that people might receive from this, particularly some of our smaller communities? You may not have a lot of staff. What kinds of technical assistance should they be seeking or thinking about?
Yes, thank you so much. So we have about 10 different categories, and those categories cover things that are really critical to building and preserving housing that's affordable. So that could be, for example, what are the funding mechanisms? How do you build a diverse capital stack? It can also be around generating community support. You've seen it very, very intently, where you might have a great project that's on your council agenda. Everyone is on board, but then you have a lot of residents coming out because they're voicing concerns. How do you build community support with your residents so they're coming out in support of the project instead of against it? So it's things like that. There will be a variety of formats as well. We really want to bring on consultants who could provide that customized assistance. Last year, we were able to offer a quarterly webinar series, and that was great for offering kind of large trainings. We had a couple of hundred people attend each one, but we wanted communities to be able to receive customized technical assistance at no cost to them. So the consultants can work with you one-on-one. Also, we'll be looking for opportunities to really stretch those dollars. And so if there's a few communities, for example, who have a common interest and it's not a particularly sensitive conversation, then we might have small peer learning groups where they can kind of learn together and maximize those efforts. And then we may also have larger scale trainings, again, if there's a lot of interest in a particular topic and it's an efficient and appropriate way to deliver that information. Part of the requests that we'll be receiving, communities will be identifying, this is how I'd like to receive the information, because we understand often that you're wearing multiple hats. And so we want to make sure that this help is available to you in a really relevant way that fits within your capacity and fits within your workflow. Thank you, Ed.
You also had a list, I think, at the bottom of your flyer. Maybe just point out some of the things.
Can I see the flyer?
Yeah, absolutely.
The specific topics. All right. So housing assessments. There's been recent legislation that says that communities of a certain size have to conduct a housing assessment each year. This will help you to comply with that. Again, we need to fit within the capacity of our funding, but we're wanting to provide as much help as possible in that space. Funding and finance opportunities, those could be low-income tax credits. It could be working with different kinds of partners, such as foundations, to be able to put those strategies into play. We've asked our consultants and really stressed with them that they need to be able to offer actionable examples that are, one, legal within Arizona and viable within Arizona. Not all funding mechanisms are right now, unfortunately. And so they'll be able to give tools that you can use right now, as well as case studies, really sharing how those tools have been used very successfully in the area. Building community support, the model ordinances. The League of Arizona Cities and Towns has done some great work. They actually have a lot of them already available on their website. That's why Renee is coming from the League to speak at our event next Tuesday, and we'll be working very closely with them. If there's an ordinance that we're hearing that communities would like to have as a template, because multiple communities would like to use it, the Matrix can help you to design that. Otherwise, the League can help walk you through the ones that they have developed as well. The partnerships with developers, when we find that housing developments are most successful, it's when the local government and the developer have worked really hand in glove and worked really well. Sometimes we hear from local governments, particularly, that developers may not listen really intently, and they'll say, well, we have this land available, and the developer will say, well, I want that land. Well, how do you build those really good partnerships? They'll be able to give examples of that and some tools and Matrix. In terms of the mentoring part of home, the mentoring, they'll also be able to kind of work with you if you would like assistance in partnering with a specific developer. Accessing the federal funding opportunities. There's a lot of funding available. It can be a quagmire sometimes, trying to figure out which funding source is most viable, and the consultants can help walk the communities through that. So hopefully that gives a better indication of what we're able to offer. And the training opportunities will be available in a variety of formats, because we want this to be as easy as possible for you to use. understanding that communities have different kinds of needs. Some are just entering the space for the first time, and so they'll need really kind of more of foundational technical assistance. And others are already very sophisticated and have a lot going on. They might just like some help in a kind of smaller niche area because they don't have to pay for it. And we have grant funding to pay for it. So no matter where you are in this conversation, we encourage you to consider this and to let us know how we might be able to support you.
Amy, I believe Mr. Brady and Mr. Phelps have questions.
Yeah, Amy, thank you. Just a question. I don't know if it's assumed in this list or what you've been talking about, but I know sometimes there's been a lot of discussion, maybe not so much recently, but with the state and the LIHTC
Mhm.
incentives. How are we informing or getting, sharing that information with the state about, because sometimes there's different eligibility requirements or criteria for where the low housing income housing can be. It has to be within a certain, maybe sometimes within a certain distance of transit, or it has to be with near activity center or something like that. It just seems like it'd be good to kind of be informed about those eligibility criteria that they're using, and then use that and be able to inform them about, well, what are we finding about through our study about whether those criteria are reasonable, because sometimes they can either work against you because they can concentrate the areas where only that incentive is available, which then creates some neighborhood problems, or maybe it puts it so far away from other services that doesn't make sense either. So it seems like that would be good to be connected with that. So I just thought I'd share that, and maybe it'd be good for your group to kind of know. I don't know how often they change those criteria, but I know they do change every once in a while, and just making sure we kind of maybe have an opportunity to weigh in about whether we think, those criteria are reasonable and do they really promote good opportunities.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brady, and members of the committee, thank you very much for that feedback. We can work very closely with Joan Service over at the Arizona Department of Housing to address those concerns. I know, for example, the Department of Housing has been receptive to other groups such as the Vilas Health Foundation when they've had feedback just like that, and they've been able to incorporate their feedback into the qualifications for those projects. So thank you. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to address a concern that Brian raised in his presentation. And first, I'd like to, thank Brian for acknowledging that there's a lot of really good work and effort being expended by really all the towns and cities here in the Valley regarding trying to address the issue of homelessness. As we know, but it is a little bit disconcerting, and I'm sure most of us were, disturbed a little bit by that notion that we're almost seeing 2 more people enter into the system for every one housing option that we've been able to provide. So to that degree, we know there are a number of root causes to homelessness. We know it could be economic, which could be non-employment, underemployment. It could be issues like leaving a dangerous situation, like fleeing domestic violence. It could be mental health or addiction issues. And then to a degree, there could be the urban camping component. As we've looked at the data of who's entering into the homeless status today, have we identified any trends of how that would compare if we looked at who entered into homelessness, say 2 years ago, 5 years ago? What is a little bit alarming to me is that oftentimes economic conditions are one of the stronger causes of homelessness, and we're in a region that has had, quite frankly, a robust economy compared nationally. And so as we look at our strategies, I'm just wondering, have we looked at the data, and is there any difference in terms of that ratio, or are we seeing growth in one area and a decrease in other areas in terms of the root causes of what's now creating people to go into homelessness today in 2024?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Phelps, and members of the committee, as Brian comes up to the podium, I'll offer just a few thoughts to that. And very, very good question. And we are equally concerned about the increase in homelessness, despite some of the other factors that might seem to suggest that it would be going down instead of going up like that. 2 factors to consider are the housing costs. They are starting to plateau, which is good news. But when we look at other communities that have lower rates of homelessness often their housing is costing less as well. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Greg Colburn's work, that homelessness is a housing problem. He compares different parts of the country, and there are some parts of the country that might have higher poverty rates, for example, but they have lower rates of homelessness because their housing is still cheaper as well. So that's one of the issues. And another issue that's also linked more generally is that during the pandemic, our region lost a lot of the lower wage jobs, and those that haven't necessarily come back yet. And so we are looking into that as well to, one, validate that hypothesis. But we do anticipate that when people aren't able to access those lower wage jobs, and sometimes they're just out of the job market because they don't have the skills to be able to reach the higher paying jobs. But I would defer to Brian and his expertise on other reasons that they've seen from the data. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Too much. Very insightful, I think. To your first question about comparing incoming folks experiencing homelessness now versus previously, we don't have that data yet. I think that's something that we could look into. We definitely track the inflow versus long-term. So when we talk about system modeling, that's one of the things that we're looking at, is like folks coming in and then folks who've been around for a while. We tend to see with the long-term people experiencing homelessness, this is folks who are experiencing things like mental health issues and so forth that keep them kind of out of housing longer. Sort of intuitive in that way. But folks coming into homelessness, that's really your 19 folks per every 10. And typically, yeah, these are due to economic issues. These are due to housing shortages. So it's pretty predictable. I think Greg Colburn's work is very insightful in this way. You look at all the cities in the country, in brief, in his book, he talks about how the ones that have low vacancy rates, so not a lot of units, and high cost of living have higher rates of homelessness. And it's pretty predictable. So if you look at the West Coast cities and cities on the Eastern Seaboard, that tends to be what you see. If you look at Rust Belt cities, you'll see, for example, the opposite, right? High vacancy rate, or so lots of empty units, and then low cost of living, no homelessness, even though some of those cities are not doing that well, right? Think about Detroit, very little homelessness, for example. So long story short, we will look into that data comparing here. I think that's something that we would love to know. I would say, looking at it on its face, we would predict to see lower acuity families coming into homelessness more quickly now than before. That would be my guess.
Great. And thank you for that. Look, I think it's just in terms of strategizing how we can move the needle, I think that data is important. At least I think it would be for us. And please, this is not a criticism. I think homelessness is the single toughest issue that I personally have ever dealt with in my government career. But it seems to me that I would recommend we should really think about a 2.0 pathways update sooner than later. And because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not heading the right direction. And we want to have achievable goals and a plan that keeps people encouraged to keep moving forward. What we don't want to do is a sense of throwing our hands up and saying, you know what, no matter what we do, we're just falling farther and farther behind. And so it may be, taking some of that data and seeing then what our strategies are. Because if it's the housing cost and not the unemployment, but underemployment from an affordability standpoint, there are multiple ways to do that. One could try to build lower cost housing, which has its challenging because the unit cost is still the unit cost to build per square foot. But it may be more solutions about how we can put people into a higher level of economic condition. And there may be policies in terms of how we address wage growth and other kinds of issues like that. So I would encourage you, at least from as one person here, to, don't set too long on 1.0. If we think we need to pivot, it's not a flag of failure. It's just a complex issue, and I just think we should be ready to kind of acknowledge that maybe the direction we have been going isn't achieving the results we've been looking for. And maybe we try to see if we can't find some other options. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to that point, I think one of the other things that we probably also need to consider as we revise and regroup is the impact that the fiscal cliff is going to have on our ability to support the preventative stuff that Kevin talked about on the front end, as well as the supportive stuff on the back end. Because I think a lot of us are going to be facing funding issues, especially with the loss of residential rental and what we stood up during the stimulus era with all of the funding that we received that was one time in nature that will just go away in the next 2 years. And I think that's going to hamper our ability to continue and sustain some of the programs that we've stood up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that comment. That, just so that you're aware, that's our central question as we're doing our lot. Start with kind of a goal question in mind, and that's definitely at the top of the list.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, as we go and we get deeper into this issue, it is the most complex issue for our society. And I think what we'll find, and we need to make connections to an educated workforce and the connectivity to education and investment to children, to families, supportive grandparents, supportive parents, and to our state government to help understand this is a long-term play. It's going to be a combination of support. It's an and discussion of supporting these preventive efforts, but also some initiative. We have a public school system out in Apache Junction that is really struggling. And I know because my brother teaches there, and I know because my wife works there, and the public kids are really working. It's a real struggle out there. And I don't think unless we start to have real discussions about that with our state legislators and with the K through 12 system, that this isn't going to get any easier for us, because we're not getting to the root, which may be an investment of like 30 years trying to understand what's going on out there.
Absolutely. Mr. Chair and Mr. Powell and members of the committee absolutely agree. But particularly our partnership with will be really helpful because we're able to track the performance of different schools, and in the analysis we can identify where are the schools outperforming beyond every other measure. So where are they doing really, really well when looking at this at the demographics, for example, they could very well be failing. And so we can work with them to take a look at that as well. Thank you. Critical issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Brian, any other questions? Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
We next move on to item number 7, which is the consultant selection for the Meridian Road Corridor study. This item is on the agenda for recommendation of approval. Tim Stroh, Major Projects Manager, will present this item. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Management Committee. Today, we'll be diving into the consultant selection for the Meridian Road Corridor study. Before we do that, I'm going to provide a little bit of background on what this study is and some of the issues and big challenges that we have facing us. For those of you who are not familiar with Meridian Road, it's in the Southeast Valley. It rests on the border of Maricopa and Pinal County. On one side, you have City of Mesa. Other side, you have Apache Junction. And there's multiple agencies that own multiple sections of this roadway, which makes it extremely challenging, but it also creates an opportunity for MAG to work with our member agencies to identify a solution moving forward, develop a vision for this corridor, and ultimately identify who's going to be owning and maintaining this roadway. The study area for this project is going to be, it's about 8.5 miles long. You have Superstition Boulevard on the north. You have State Route 24 on the south. Two very unique different sections of roadway. They're going to take different levels of planning and coordination with our member agencies. The north section from Superstition Boulevard to US 60, it already exists today. It's 1 lane each direction, soft shoulders, doesn't have bike lanes, intermittent sidewalks, speed limit about 35 miles per hour. So this area we're going to be taking a look at making roadway improvements, intersection improvements, really looking at bike and pedestrian improvements, adding bike lanes, sidewalks. But we're also going to coordinate with ADOT on looking at the US 60 Meridian Road interchange. It's a partial interchange right now, provides access to westbound traffic and then eastbound off-ramp, which makes sense because it's the predominant movement for people going to work every single day. But since we're out there doing this study, we thought we'd take a look at building a full traffic interchange. South section is where it gets fun. This is where the consultants are going to make their money. It starts from just south of the US 60 traffic interchange, goes down to State Route 24. As you can see on the map, there's 2 sections of the roadway that do not exist today, on the north and in the south. We also have in the north, you see that circle up there at Baseline Road, we have an offset that we need to address. You can see examples of how that's been improved at Signal Butte, has the little S curve in there. So we're gonna do the same thing. Well, we're gonna take a look at different alternatives in this area. There's a lot of challenges up where that circle is up there. In addition to the offset, we have earth fissures, which I've never had to deal with as a planner before. But this area is unique. So we'll be taking a look at that. We have significant drainage issues, utility issues, and we have a lot of coordination that needs to take place with the state land department. So this section of this corridor study, we're going to be really taking a look at how much right of way we have available to us, looking at different alignment options, identifying the number of lanes, bringing all the stakeholders together to understand and all agree upon what's this corridor look like in the future and who's going to own it and maintain it. I brought up state lands, the east side of the road, massive parcels of state lands that are still going to go to auction in the future. This green section here is about, I believe it's about 2,800 acres that is already put out for bid, and there's homes being built on it today. There's even more homes coming in. The developer's actually improving the east side of Meridian Road, which is fantastic. But they're going to be a key stakeholder in this project. We really need to make sure we understand future plans and what those impacts are going to be. Also, one of the biggest pieces of this study is going to be stakeholder outreach. That's one thing I forgot to include. We're going to do a ton of technical analysis, but we want to make sure that we do this right. We're going to be going old school and sending out door hangers and mailings and emails. We're going to have multiple in-person public meetings, make sure all the residents have their concerns addressed. So for the consultant selection process, after we ran through the amendment to the work program and budget to add this study to the MAG program, we advertised an RFP for about 29 days. RFPs were due on July 15th. We actually received 6 proposals for this study, which was fantastic. That's a good number for this size. We brought together members to create a consultant selection committee, consisted of Apache Junction staff, Mesa, Maricopa County, and Pinal County, and then myself. We reviewed, scored, and ranked the proposals, and we selected Wilson and Company to manage the study, with Kimley Horn as the in second place if contract negotiations with Wilson do not go through. So, Mr. Chair, that completes my presentation. This is on the agenda for action.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have any questions from members of the committee? Starting with Mr. Brady, Mr. Powell?
Just huge thanks to the team work out there and Chris and your team of getting us all together to MAG. It really is a really tough, lot of different jurisdictions, and we look forward to working, on it together.
Okay. As you know,
I'll make the motion. Let's move.
So prior to the voting, we do have an opportunity for members of the public, but as we've mentioned earlier, we have no written comments and no one is here to speak. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Powell,
Second.
second by Mr. Brady. So now that we'll have those participating in the meeting online take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who did not have on their camera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Kathy Valenzuela?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We now move on to item number 8, which is an air quality update. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Matt Poppin, Environmental Director, will present the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Management Committee. We did want to spend some time today talking about ozone and PM 2.5, the topics that we've talked about consistently, but we wanted to get you up to date on some milestones that we're hitting and some future work that you can expect to hear from us. So with ozone, we always like to start with this slide because it really presents the challenge that's ever before us. So as I kind of go into some more detail about the challenges with ozone, it's always important to have this slide in the background as we talk about it. So just really briefly, what this slide is showing, as you've seen before, the ozone concentration in our region is that blue line. And you can see over time it has gone down. But since about 2015, 2016, the concentrations have gone up pretty consistently to where we're at a level of about 0.08 parts per million or 80 parts per billion, like we usually talk about it, which is 10 parts per billion over the current standard. But what is the challenge is that that is occurring while our local emissions have been decreasing. So the columns in this chart are emissions of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. These are the two emissions that form ozone in the air. And you can see over time, those have consistently decreased. So we have this kind of contradiction where our local emissions are decreasing, but our ozone continues to rise. So this remains our biggest challenge as we move forward with ozone. So how have we been doing recently? As of August 1st for the year 2024, we've had 42 exceedance days. So that's 42 days where at least one monitor in the region has an ozone concentration of 71 or higher. That's pretty consistent with where we've been the last few years. So obviously it's still a major issue. And just to highlight, it's the fourth highest exceedance that is used for regulatory purposes for comparison against the standard. So you're basically given 3 free exceedances a year. Once you get to fourth exceedance, you know you've already exceeded the standard. And obviously we've had a multitude of these. We've had 42 of them. There's a variety of causes for these exceedances. Wildfires have certainly impacted these a lot, but there's a lot of days when wildfire impacts have not been a part of the issue as well. So it continues to be an issue for this year as well. Some important timelines to talk about associated with ozone. As kind of a starting point, as we've talked about, EPA issued a finding of failure to submit a moderate area plan that said, hey, we were going to meet the standard. And so that triggered some sanctions clock that are running and that we're currently under. The next date that we really wanted to talk about today was our moderate area attainment date, and that was this past Sunday. This is the date when the air quality was supposed to meet the standard. So our air quality was supposed to be at 70 parts per billion to meet attainment with the standard. And obviously, we failed to meet that date. We're currently at 80 parts per billion, so we're 10 parts per billion over the standard. So what's going to happen is eventually EPA is going to issue a finding of failure to attain and reclassify the region to a serious area. We've known this has been coming for quite a while. EPA has as long as 6 months under the Clean Air Act to make that designation. They could do it as soon as tomorrow if they wanted to, but we anticipate they'll probably wait until closer to that February 3rd date. We're not the only area that's going to be bumped up to serious, notably our colleagues in Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Denver, all of them are going to be bumped up as well. So the issues we're experiencing here are common throughout the Intermountain West. The first sanctions, again, associated with our failure to submit a moderate area plan would hit May 17th, 2025 if we don't do anything. The second highway funding sections would hit November 17th, 2025. But the good news is we can submit a plan to EPA that addresses outstanding moderate area requirements that will turn off those sanctions. So we will be doing that at MAG. We will be putting together a plan that addresses all of the moderate area requirements except for attainment. Obviously, we can't say, hey, we're going to make the standard, but we can address all of the other requirements. EPA has told us if we put together that plan and submit it to them before that first sanctions date occurs, it will turn off the sanctions. So that's our number one priority moving forward. Going back to the serious area plan, we'll have a new date for that. That'll be due January 1st, 2026. And that plan will be required to show how we can demonstrate attainment by our new attainment date, which is 3 years from what it was, August 3rd, 2027. So that's going to be a challenge to put together a plan that says, hey, air quality is going to be good enough in 2027 to meet the standard. So sort of in summary of those timelines, we've got 3 parallel efforts going on to address these ozone requirements. The first effort, as I mentioned, was to put together that moderate area plan to turn off the sanctions. So we're working on doing that. That plan will be submitted to EPA before the first sanctions clock is triggered. That plan will come before Management Committee and Regional Council for approval. So you will see that. We hope to have a draft of that available towards the end of this year. It will likely come through Management Regional Council in January, February cycle. While we're doing that, we're working on developing a serious area plan. And really what we're doing on that right now is we're developing the emissions inventories. So again, we're trying to figure out how much stuff is being emitted into the air. We're going to know that probably later this month. And then we're going to also model that to see how much reductions of that stuff is needed to attain the standard. So we'll be able to give some preliminary numbers coming up. This is the stuff that's in the air, and this is the reductions that are going to be needed to try and put together an approvable plan to submit to EPA. And then lastly, we're in continued engagement with EPA to address those regional ozone challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, right? As we're trying to put together these plans to meet these federal requirements, we have to continue to press EPA to give us new science to explain why our ozone goes up despite reductions in local emissions. We also need relief from exceedances caused by wildfires, relief from exceedances caused by international transport emissions. So we're doing all these things, these three things in parallel, and wanted to get you up to speed on that. Okay, switching over to PM 2.5 update. Again, PM 2.5 are the really small particles that can be inhaled and easily trapped in your lungs. So they're the very finest particles from combustion or disturbing the soil. And just as a reminder, EPA set a new standard for PM 2.5 back in February of this year. And it was a stricter standard, an annual standard. They lowered it from an existing standard of 12 down to 9. So where we are currently is the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality is accepting informal comments on their draft non-attainment area boundaries for both Maricopa County and Pinal County. This map is the current boundary that they have put together for Maricopa County. Again, the dots in red are the 3 violating monitors that exceed the standard. So there's an opportunity. We've had them come and present at our Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee. They've also hosted another meeting on their own here at MAG. There's an opportunity for you as cities to provide data, to provide comments to them informally on what these boundaries should look like. So that's currently ongoing, and that process can continue. A formal comment period will likely begin in September, where formal comments on that boundary can be submitted to ADEQ, and then ADEQ will formally submit their recommendations to the governor on January 7th, and then the governor must submit those recommendations to EPA on February 7th. EPA will have a year after that to issue what the final boundaries will be. So that's our update for today. If there's any questions on that, happy to take it. Just wanted to get you up to speed on where we were with timing on these exercises.
Thanks for the update, Matt. Do we have any questions for members of the committee? Chair?
Matt, you say we're now at 80 parts per billion. How long have we been above the 70, I guess? Has it been, it's not just recently, right? I mean, it's not only, like you said, we've seen this decline in emissions, but how long, what's the record of how long we've been at that exceedance?
Right, I'm heading back here to that first slide. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brady. So you can see, if you look down here at the bottom on the left side of the graph, the 0.07 is parts per million right here.
Oh, okay, there it is. Okay.
That's 70 parts per billion. So we've never been at 70.
I was afraid that was the answer. So
The lowest we've gotten is 75.
okay.
in
So even
2015.
going back to, how far back do you go? 19, I mean,
That's 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
We've never, I mean, it's like, when did these rules go into effect with the EPA?
Right. So it's the 2015 EPA standard. So the most strictest standard came into effect in 2015 of 70. Before that, it was 75. That was issued in 2008. So technically, we met the 2008 standard in 2015 of 75 parts
Okay.
per million.
All right. Okay. That doesn't help. I just, thank you.
Chair?
Maybe.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Quick question. Are either of these two requirements, ozone or the 2.5, affected by the Supreme Court decision on Chevron? And are we challenging the ability to impose these requirements on the region?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had discussions with our Washington, D.C. legal counsel on that. These are pretty well set in stone in the sense that there's not a lot of ambiguity associated with setting a standard now that it's in place. And for example, these deadlines are Clean Air Act deadlines, so there's not a lot of room for a judge to make an alternative interpretation of it. So from our Washington, D.C. legal counsel's perspective, the Supreme Court ruling on Chevron likely wouldn't be able to impact legal challenges on the standard itself, likely wouldn't be made under Chevron. So we don't anticipate that these will go away even with an administration change. It's very difficult to change existing standards. There's quite a bit of a process that you'd have to go through. So from our perspective, we anticipate these will stay in place moving forward and won't be challenged or won't be overturned by Supreme Court action.
And Matt, excuse my ignorance, but these aren't the type of numbers that I'm used to because I'm not an environmental scientist, but is this a situation where we're taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back or vice versa for all the new development that's coming in? Are we sure that the new development isn't increasing our standards when we are moving the other way?
Right. We have pretty good confidence that our local emissions do continue to decrease, even though development increases, right? I think there's kind of a general default of people tend to think more people equal more pollution, right? But that's not what we're seeing. The cleaner cars, the cleaner industries, the cleaner products you buy in the store, all of those things have helped to offset the natural increases you would get with people. So we have pretty good confidence, and most of this data is actually EPA data. It's not even our data. So there is a chance that those emission numbers could be wrong, but this is the conundrum we're facing. We don't really understand why ozone is increasing when we feel like our local emissions are going down. We do think wildfire is a huge part of it, and that's why we draw the line there in green, what we think the concentrations would be if you took out wildfires. But there's also other impacts, could be climate impacts, but that's why that third tier, that third parallel effort is so important, right? So for you to be able to make informed decisions as policymakers, you have to have some sort of confidence in the science behind any plan we bring forward.
Any other questions for Matt? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did I hear someone online?
Yes, sir, he did. It says Matthew Williams, Litchfield Park. Question. We had talked a few months ago, you showed that you're 42 days over the amount per year. If I remember a few months ago, we talked about it was basically an average through the year. Like if you had a few days that were higher, of course, it throws off your average over your other days. Are some of your highest days still New Year's and July 4th?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that's in terms of PM 2.5. Not in terms of ozone. So our highest PM 2.5 exceedance days are going to be New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve because of consumer fireworks. But in terms of ozone, we get those exceedances throughout the summer. And they can occur on any day throughout April through September.
Okay. So the 2.5 is very affected by fireworks, but not the ozone.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Matt. Item number 9 is an executive director's report. Mr. Zerker, do you have an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really quickly, just one slide. Tyler, if you go to the third one, you mentioned Stephen. Educational efforts for Prop 479. Now the July 30th election date is over. The next election date is the one in which voters will decide on Prop 479 in Maricopa County and Prop 486 in Pinal County. As it relates to Prop 479, we've been highlighting efforts that you all as individual agencies have been making. And the latest examples, we have Mesa, which has a webpage with reviews how funding proposed under the plan benefits their residents. In Phoenix, they have a fact sheet in English and Spanish outlining the key investments planned, including bus rapid transit. And Tolleson has a web page that they put up that walks their residents through the plan and what it means for them. We've highlighted several of your agencies before in this regard and just encourage you to consider ways to continue to educate your residents about the importance of 479 for regional congestion mitigation and mobility. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Zerker. If anyone has questions about any of those items, you can see the executive director after the meeting. Item number 10 is the legislative update, but we have no update today, so we will be moving on to item number 11, which is a request for future agenda items. Are there any requests from the membership for future agenda item requests? Hearing none, we move on to item number 12, which are comments from the committee. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? Hearing none. The next meeting of this committee will be on Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 at 12 p.m. With no further business, today's meeting is adjourned.